Good morning. Thanks for being with us. Mornings with Richard Cross on SuperTalk Mississippi. Love for you to join the conversation, whether you agree or disagree. Want to hear from you. 601-879-4395. That's the number for the C Spire text line. We are joined this morning by the Speaker of the House in the Mississippi Legislature. Jason White joins us. Good morning, my friend. How are you today?
I'm good, Richard. Good morning. Good to be with you. It's not many political talk shows you come on where Sturgill Simpson's the lead in, but I got to give Lance some props over there. He's bringing it strong this morning.
I mean,
on a Tuesday morning.
How good is that at 20 minutes after 7 on a Tuesday morning?
And that was just for him, too.
You ain't lying. It's outstanding.
Beautiful. Maybe you could get a little soundtrack going on while you got stuff going on the floor, just a little bed of music to kind of keep things moving along in the house.
Well, the next song will be even better, and he knows what's coming.
Paul used to reminisce a little bit. He used to like to play, when we get here and talk about infrastructure, he would always play Miranda Lambert, My Little Red Wagon, and it was really good. He could get to that good part of the song. He'd always lead in with that. It was good.
Did we roll with that yesterday, Lance?
I can't remember what we were
I don't think we did.
I don't even remember yesterday.
We were talking MDOT yesterday. Maybe that was a good time for...
I think he said the wheels are broken, the axle's dragging.
There you go. Certainly always good to be with you. So much going on in the legislature. I think we are actually in a week with no deadlines, which has not been the norm over the last couple of weeks, and I know that they're coming again. But, I mean, we'd be burying the lead if we just didn't start with the tax reform conversation. You and the governor and the legislature, or the House, laid out pretty clearly right out of the gate, House Bill 1. We've talked with you about the Build Up Mississippi Act. Took a while to get a bill from the Senate, but we have that, and now people are kind of in the compare and contrast mode and wondering what this looks like over the days to come. So let's start there. Your reaction to the bill that came from the Senate in terms of tax reform, because there are very key differences.
There are key differences, but I have to point out one key thing right out of the chute, Richard, and that is you're talking about the bill that came from the Senate. We actually don't have a bill from the Senate. Not only do we not have one passed by the Senate, we don't have a bill dropped in the Senate. So words on paper matter, and we hadn't seen their bill yet. And as a matter of fact, senators have not seen their bill yet. So it's only concept and on a poster board. I'm not being critical of that. You got to talk about it and get it out there. And we did the same thing before we dropped our bill. I'm just saying, to this point, we don't have a Senate bill. Now, I'll take them at their word in their 3-point plan of cutting income tax from 4 to 3, dropping the grocery tax from 7 to 5, and then phasing in a gas excise tax increase of 9 cents, 3 cents a year over 3 years, and then indexing afterwards. Those are good pieces. Nobody's out saying the Senate's bad for that being their first stab at a tax cut. But I do have to point out, and there is a little bit of a track record of folks down there talking about something, and then when the bill comes out, it looks totally different. So I do have to say with some degree of caution, that's what they've said. The lieutenant governor was saying something different a month ago. Now this is this. We'll see what the bill says, and we'll see what they actually pass in the Senate, because I know there are some senators down there who are not crazy about raising any tax if it doesn't include an elimination of the personal income tax, even over a lengthy period of time. So that
when
may
do
be
you
a
think the bill's coming?
That may be, brother. If you could predict that, we would. You wouldn't be on SuperTalk, and I wouldn't be here with you. We'd be doing something much different. Probably pretty quick. I don't know. I mean, they've had a press conference and an unveiling of an idea. I'm sure a bill is forthcoming. I'm just saying it hadn't hit the computer. Even as of 5 minutes ago, I was looking before I came in, because all of my people are anxious to look at it, because there was some talk about whether or not they kept cities whole in their grocery tax cut, because as you know, that is a major revenue producer for cities in the way they collect taxes and fund their local governments. If you're going to cut the grocery tax, that's great. We need to do that. We have the highest in the country, but our cities obtain most of their sales tax revenue from grocery tax sales or tax on food. So the House plan,
and that was made up in the House bill with the additional 1.5% on sales tax, right?
Well, there was an additional 1.5% sales tax across the board. But even as we cut grocery tax down to 4% over a longer period of time than they do, we cut it 1% the first year and then cut it another 2% over a longer period of time. but we keep the cities. They get a full cent and a half even on groceries in our plan. We don't reduce them. We just totally absorb that on the state side. And so there was some talk about how the Senate plan would do that, because there wasn't a lot of detail about that. So I mean, those are smart guys over there. I'm not taking anything away from them. They'll figure that part out. I'm just telling you, it's a main sticking point right out of the chute that their bill doesn't call for the elimination of the income tax, and it requires us going back, passing more legislation, and whatever way the political winds are blowing on that particular day will determine that.
So the gas tax piece of it is fascinating to me. Forgive me for using the same example over and over, but I feel like it's important for people to hear. The 5% sales tax, if you will, on gas, at its most simple, you go to the gas pump, you spend $100 on a tank of gas, your bill is going to be $105, a 5% tax on the $100 that you spent, whereas on the Senate side with the excise tax, that is baked into the cost that you pay at the pump already. So if you're paying $2.68 a gallon for gas, there is a new 9-cent excise tax that goes to the state that is part of the cost that you already pay. So why the sales tax on gas versus an excise tax like the Senate has in their plan? And I guess I asked that with the backdrop of, it seems to me that the excise tax would make it easier for budgeting purposes going forward, as opposed to the sales tax that would go up and down as the price of gas goes up and down.
Well, I think that's the main feature of a sales tax, is it tracks the price of gas, whereas their plan, if you will, as you say, it's baked in. I think even if it was if ultimately it was decided that a sales tax was the way to go, and that was the legislation that turned into law, you're still going to, if you're at the pump and you're pumping gas, it's going to click on $100, and that's going to have all of that probably baked in already. The states that do have a sales tax do it that way. But regardless of that, so it's not a deal where you're going to pay $100 and then they're going to hand you the receipt and you owe $105. Correct. They will have put that 5% into the cost of a gallon of gas, and when you get to the final number, it's going to be the final number. Right, but regardless of that, the House is not hung up on it has to be a sales tax. We're fine with excise tax. Now some folks do not want an index, and theirs has an index. I personally have thought from day one we should have had an index on our gas, and we wouldn't be in the position we are in today, where we're trying to fund 2025 roads on a 1987 expense of 18 cents a gallon. So that part is won't be a sticking point. Whether we can go with excise tax and an index over sales tax. Nobody's hung up about that. Nobody's hung up about phasing in the increase in the gas tax. That probably makes sense. That's not now we have real needs at MDOT today, not 3 years from now. So we'll have to figure that out. But we got money in the bank. We can, luckily we've got almost $3 billion sitting in the bank account that is not obligated, that can be spent on infrastructure. So we can do an immediate cash infusion and phase in the step up of an excise tax. That part's not a hang up. What the Senate knows is a hang up with the governor and with most of my House colleagues is not eliminating the personal income tax. And so a lot of people think it's a poison pill right from the get-go. It's a safe political bet to throw that plan out there knowing it's not going to be, while it is a serious plan, it's not going to be taken serious because everybody within 5 miles of the Capitol knows the governor has already weighed in early and often on the fact that he's not crazy about raising sales tax or gas tax, but he's willing to go there if it's a $1 billion tax cut to Mississippians, and that's what House Bill 1 does. The other big thing, if we take them at their word on their 3-point plan, is they've done nothing for local governments who are faced with some of the same issues that we are faced with in state government. They have asked forever for some form of increased revenue because guess what? If you don't allow them some increased revenue in the form of sales tax, guess where they go to get that money? Your property taxes. Cities and counties both. It's the only other mechanism they have, and for counties, it's really the only mechanism they have. So we are trying to keep those property taxes down too, and part of that was allowing, with this new cent and a half, now cities receive about $1.2 1.26, 1.28. They would receive 1.5. It's almost a 20% increase in the diversion to them.
And we talked about that a few weeks ago.
That's real money. And I heard somebody ask the lieutenant governor, "What about the cities?" He said, "Cities are going to be fine." Well, I can talk to Robin Tannehill in Oxford and find out if she's going to be fine. I'll let her speak for herself on it.
And one of the things we talked about with Trey Lamar a few weeks ago was kind of looking at the real numbers in the plan and showing that cities were actually going to come out ahead across the board with this plan.
Sure.
We got more
With
coming
House
up with
Bill
Speaker of the House, Jason White. Quick timeout. Mornings with Richard Cross on Super Talk, Mississippi. Revenue and expenses. That's kind of what this all comes down to if it's going to work in the long run. We'll pick it up there when we come back. We'll go to the revenue and expenses thing in just a second, but I will forgive you if you say, "Hey, I'm not going to negotiate against something that doesn't exist." In so much as the Senate bill does not actually exist yet. Is there a compromise to be made short of full elimination of the personal income tax?
You never say never, Richard, and you're right. It's tough to negotiate against yourself when there's no product to hold up and compare and contrast. It is a main sticking point for the House. It is a strong position when every House Republican, not all but 5, not all but 3, or not all but 10, every House Republican voted for House Bill 1. And that wasn't after arm twisting or cajoling or talking or this or that. It was where my people are, and so that's going to be a hard position for my people to retreat from. Now, when you couple that strong position from the House with the fact that the governor has said he's not for raising these other taxes if you're not eliminating the personal income tax. Now, all right, now you got two things. Now that's two things you got to consider. So there's no denying we need to do something with our infrastructure, with our roads and bridges, and the way we fund MDOT. This is the time to do that. Republican supermajorities exist in both the House and Senate. It's time we are adults and figure out a way to fund those things that are priorities for every Mississippian, not even just Republicans, but every Mississippian. And we can do that as part of this bill. If you're not eliminating the personal income tax, you've got one of the branches of government that has said, I'm not all that for all these other things. So,
but if I remember correctly, the governor has said that he would never stand in the way of tax reduction for Mississippians. Right? I mean, I know that the goal is eliminate the personal income tax, but he has also, if I remember correctly, said, I'm not going to veto legislation that reduces taxes for Mississippians.
And so the devil will be in the details of that.
Jeez.
We'll see where we get.
All right, so the revenue
I am
and
smart
expenses
enough
piece.
around here to never say never, but at the same time, what I'm telling you is it's a strong position for the House. And, if folks want to talk about they are for this or they are for that, now's the time. Everybody says, well, we're for it. Well, let's see if you're for it. I got tickled. It was one day this week, maybe yesterday or day before, your counterpart that comes on a little later today, Gerard Gibbert, had a post. He said, in Mississippi, we're all about freedom and conservatism and free markets and all these great things, except when it comes to education and health care and mobile sports betting and alcohol sales and ballot initiatives. I would just point out on all of those issues, the House has sent very reasonable conservative measures to the Senate, and they find the same slow, quiet death. And I think on this one, on eliminating the personal income tax, we're probably not going to go quietly. We're probably not going to let that die that slow, quiet death and be talked to death and let the clock run out and there's confusion and the bills are complicated and all that good stuff that political speak you hear. We're probably not going there on this one. We're going to do it in the broad daylight. And if they don't want to do it, we'll get a budget and we'll get out of there. But we're not going to get into spending the money. We're not going to get into all the candy that folks like to get into. It'll be straightforward. and we'll move on. We're not going to check a box. We're not going to check a box.
The
I'll put it
elimination of
that
the
way.
personal income tax only works if you can replace the revenues that are eliminated. And I know some of that is moving money around. Does House Bill 1 account for new expenditures that the state is going to be on the hook for? We don't have a specific ask, or at least I don't think we do yet, from Medicaid. But I think most everybody knows that the amount of money that the state is going to have to spend on Medicaid going forward is going up, and is going up significantly. Is there still enough money? Can you point to those numbers to cover additional expenses without putting the state in the red?
Yes, depending on, now, nobody, there are lots of unknowns surrounding the Medicaid program, specifically the one that you bring up, and I won't.
Because of what's going to happen at the federal level.
Yeah, because I won't chase that rabbit right now because it's extremely complex, and look, we're in no man's land when it comes to that because the Trump administration has said they're going to redo and rethink the whole ball of wax surrounding Medicaid, and certainly we have a large Medicaid population. I tell folks, if you're sitting at a red light or a four-way and you look around, one of those four people is probably on Medicaid in Mississippi. If all four of you hit that. Now, in Oxford, y'all have roundabouts, so you just keep going around in a circle. But where I am, we all hit a four-way stop, and one of the four of you is on Medicaid in Mississippi. And so with those kind of statistics, we do have to be very careful when it comes to our revenue and covering core functions of government. But I would say, specifically when it comes to Medicaid, I think the jury's out on how we do that entire program. And when you say have to, Mississippians, there are certain things they expect from their government. There's certain things that they think we kind of get outside the bounds of that. And so restricting revenue with tax cuts, it's easy to make budgets, Richard, when you've got an extra $600 to $800 million to $1 billion sitting over here. It's easy to make budgets. When somebody asks for an extra $50 million or $40 million, you just grab it out of that extra over there. What makes our budgeters and our appropriators really, really work and earn their money is when we say we're going to function at a high level for sure, and fund core functions of government, but in a way that Mississippians expect us to budget and not just take the easy way out and just throw the money at it. Because people don't handle taxpayer money the way they handle their own money. And I know that. I've been in the room when that stuff's going on, and it's not pretty. So to answer your question, yes, nobody's here to slash budgets. Nobody's here to go back to some archaic. We're finally digging out of some holes with corrections and with CPS and our mental health. Nobody wants to go back to those days where we're getting sued or potentially getting sued on issues. We want to move away from those. But I would just tell you, government has grown over the last few years. Budgets have increased significantly. Some of that inflation, some of that from the federal surplus, whatever you want to call it. But there's no denying we've grown government plenty over the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years. It's time for us to tighten the belt a little bit and figure it out instead of just throwing money at it. And I expect you'll see that in the form of the budgets that the House starts proposing this week. You'll see those bills start tracking that are level funding government year over year. And with this surplus, this 10%, 8 to 10% surplus we keep running, certainly there's room there in and of itself to absorb a large tax cut. That's why the House bill cuts a full percent of personal income tax, and House Bill 1 cuts it the very first year, goes from 4 to 3. That's a $500 million cut right out of the chute. Now, we have attempted to replace part of that revenue by moving to a consumption-based economy and raising the sales tax slightly while still remaining competitive with our surrounding states when it comes to sales tax. We're not married to that. But you have to acknowledge on some front, if we're moving away from personal income tax and moving to a consumption-based economy, which if you were setting it up from scratch or if Lance was setting it up from scratch, that's the way everybody would do it. You wouldn't tax people's work and their income and their productivity. You would tax on the things that they buy and their consumption. That's the way the states that are just killing it, that's the way they fund their government. And we can get there. And the House bill does it over a conservative, lengthy amount of time, 3/10 a year after the first year, That's very doable. We've never not grown in revenues 2 to 3% historically. That's more than enough to absorb that. With a slight increase in the sales tax, it's easily doable if folks watch how we spend our money. And I think it's going to take that part.
Timeline on the Senate proposal is a little more aggressive than the House proposal, but the House proposal goes farther in the long run in terms of that elimination. Revenues quickly. So the mid-year report had the state tracking about $100 million off pace from a year ago. I talked to someone a couple of days ago that said the following month's update got it really close to net zero at this point. Is that accurate?
That's correct. We were up. Last time I saw $54 million for January. So we're back. We're going to hit right around the number. Look, those folks are mighty smart that peg that number of what we're going to get. And they may miss it by $50 million, but on $7 billion, $800 million, that's pretty close if they're within $50 million. We're not worried about that number. That number's going to hit just right. Out years, yeah, we got to watch them. It's a real issue. Hey, don't forget, House Bill 1 speaks to PERS and funds $100 million annually to help that deficit. The Senate plan just doesn't go there.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe we're going to, rub sticks together and find some money somewhere else. I don't know.
Well, that obviously would be separate legislation altogether, which would be a whole nother debate. We'll wrap things up.
No, sir. It's in House Bill 1, Richard. $100 million a year.
I'm saying on the Senate side, though, if the Senate took it up,
yep.
I mean, PERS has to be addressed at some point.
We've learned about phantom bills from the Senate. They just never seem to show up.
Speaker of the House, Jason White. We'll wrap it up with him coming up next. I think there are probably other things that we need to talk about, and yet the messages are coming in fast and furious as we talk about tax reform, House Bill 1, the Senate's plan, or as Speaker White says, the Senate's lack of a plan, and more. This is Mornings with Richard Cross on SuperTalk Mississippi. I'm going to combine a couple of questions that we've gotten on the C Spire text line. See where you go with this. Speaker White says he doesn't want to chase rabbits. Unfortunately, some rabbits need to be caught before committing to reduced revenue. Does the Speaker subscribe to responsibly cutting government and then cutting taxes, or just chopping the head off and letting it bleed out for someone else to fix later?
Well, I would tell you, I think you'll see in the budget this year where we are. As far as chopping the head off and letting it bleed out for somebody else to fix later, politicians are nothing. Nobody's voting for this plan saying, I want to wreck state government and I'll let the door slam on the way out for somebody else to fix it. A whole lot of smart people looked at the plan. It didn't just show up in the middle of the night. And for, I got tickled at the Lieutenant Governor's press conference on their ideas for a tax reform or tax cut plan. One of his reporters asked him a question about, did the Legislative Budget Office verify these numbers? And he kind of smiled and said, yes. Well, Legislative Budget Office verifies all the numbers. They verified the numbers in the House bill plan. It's a matter of what is the priority. And certainly, if you are cutting revenue that's coming in, you're going to have to look close at budgets. But right. I think that forces the issue a little bit, which I'm fine with, and my people are fine with. Yes, if you're going to cut income tax and get it to zero and totally eliminate that portion of the way we gather revenue to fund state government, yes, you're going to have to replace it or find other revenue. That's what House Bill 1 attempts to do. That's what I would tell you it does. But yes, the combination is that and controlling spending. And I think you're going to see that. I think you've seen that. But there's no denying we made a historic investment in K-12 public education last year. Now, Republicans don't get they don't get a big pat on the back for that because we're the bad old Republicans who supposedly don't like public education. So we didn't, there were no ceremonies or great celebrations last year when we made that historic investment. But it was the right thing to do, and we're finally up on par. And we can have a level fund budget this year, year over year, that also fully funds that formula going forward. And I think you'll see that. Certainly, I hope whoever's elected later on will find that our state is in a good place. And nobody that's worked on this plan wants anything but that. So the idea of you can't replace it, well, those are the people that are worried about spending money. Those are the people that are worried about growing government. We're worried about holding it down. Does this force the issue a little bit? Certainly it does. Certainly it does. But I welcome that.
Let me ask you this, and I know this is kind of apples to oranges. I'm thinking about this from investment strategy. You've heard people always say, you got to spend money to make money. Is this a scenario where the House is saying we're going to go with a little bit more aggressive investment strategy because we believe there's a long horizon to reap the rewards of doing this, and the Senate is saying, no, we're going to rely on savings accounts that are generating interest, and we're just going to grow slowly, and we think we're going to be in a good place. That may not be the best metaphor or comparison, but is that comparable?
I can't say that it's not. And look, Richard, I'm poking my Senate colleagues a little bit this morning, but I want to be clear about this. I am glad.
Yeah, you were clear about that.
They have unveiled an attempt to cut the income tax and to cut the grocery tax and to find more revenue for roads and bridges. Those are incredibly positive things. That is an incredibly positive first step. I'm glad for that. What I'm now urging and going to urge them to do, and my job going forward over these next few weeks, will be to try to convince them that the way for Mississippi going forward is to move away from the personal income tax and move to a consumption-based economy. I do think that takes a slight raise in the sales tax.
Okay.
We can do that and remain more than competitive with our sister states and move away. If we're too fast with the way we want to do it, I'm all ears from them on how we get there. But to just check a box, I just don't think that's going to work with my House colleagues.
On a scale of 1 to 10, what is the fiscal risk for the state of Mississippi going forward if House Bill 1 was adopted as it is written?
I would tell you there's no fiscal risk. And here's the other thing I would tell you. The Senate tells you, well, we come in every year, we can cut some more in a few years and cut some more. Guess what? We come in every year. If House Bill 1 is the reckless disaster that some of those on the other end call it, that will bear that out. They'll be here to handle those things going forward. Nobody's not talking about funding core functions of government.
Jason White, Speaker of the House, Mississippi House of Representatives. Sorry that this was
Richard,
like a one-topic conversation.
Congrats on your new post. We're glad you are where you are, and glad for you to be here.
Thank you for your time.
I know Paul is smiling down and probably laughing at me this morning.
Wouldn't be the first time, though.
No, it wouldn't be.
Jason White, Speaker of the House. Look forward to talking with you again soon.
Good to be with you, Richard.
Mornings with Richard Cross, SuperTalk Mississippi. We're back after this.